Welcome to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson from Proteum Machining, and this week I'm joined by Brad Frazier of Hourglass Ingenuity. Welcome, Brad.
How you doing?
Good. Thanks for coming on. I know that you're insanely swamped. Just looking at your Instagram feed, it's like I can tell another person who is working all hours of the day.
Absolutely, man. It's the only way to be right now. You got to put in the work to build something so you can take a few days off later on.
Definitely. So before we jump into your backstory, why don't you let the listeners know what you got going on? What is Hourglass Ingenuity? Where can they find you online so they can follow along as we go through your stuff?
So Hourglass Ingenuity came about a few years ago when I was trying to figure out an Instagram name. And kind of the meaning behind it is being, kind of using ingenuity in a timely manner. Just a quick, rapid prototyping, fail fast, as John Saunders says. Just fail fast, fail quick. It either works or it doesn't. I don't want to spend way too much time trying to figure something out if it's not working out. I have a short attention span. So, this whole thing started out as me doing a little bit of TIG welding, some fabrication, and that kind of blossomed into me trying to find problems to solve, just daily occurrences in my daily, fab life, building things to make my life a little bit easier. And then I kind of dabbled with Fusion 360 and started learning how to do some 3D modeling. And then that turned into 3D printing. And then that turned into me building a couple of little small CNC machines, just little 3-axis guys myself, so I could get into it and kind of understand how it all worked on a small scale. And then, I did that for a few years, and it kind of blossomed into being able to get my own machine and try and see if I could take the risk and see what happened. So it's kind
awesome. And then you've got a YouTube channel and an Instagram. Where can they find you on there so they can pull it up?
So on Instagram, it's Hourglass Ingenuity, HOUR_GLASS_Ingenuity. And then exact same thing on YouTube.
Awesome. Yeah, I was watching some of your videos last night, this morning in preparation, and it was cool to see, all the car stuff you do and bikes, and it sounds like we've got some interests that are the same for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's been so demanding. I have absolutely zero time to do any videos, but it's fun when I do have time.
Yeah. Well, it was cool going back. I mean, your last video was, 8 or 9 months ago, and just the growth you've had since then is really cool to see. So
yeah, no, it's been awesome. It has been awesome. It's easy to grow when you're doing, 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, and figuring all types of stuff out.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So let's jump into your backstory. How did you get to where you are? How did you get in the fab? How did you get in the machining? All that stuff.
So, fab. Do you know what a Honda Ruckus is?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've got quite a few friends that have done engine swaps on Ruckuses.
Okay, so that's where it all started for me. Bought a Honda Ruckus from the dealer. Started doing the hackiest stuff to it because I didn't know any better. Cutting my bars because I didn't have the money to buy new bars. Just doing stuff like that. And then that led into me going to Sears and picking up a flux core MIG welder and trying my hand at sticking some metal together. And that went downhill real quick. And I was never happy with it. It looked horrible. It did kind of stick stuff together, but it wasn't what I was looking for. So got a bottle of gas and tried, true MIG welding. And that went a little bit better, but then it still wasn't the look I was going for. I wanted that TIG aesthetic. So picked up a TIG machine, started messing with that. That's when I was living in Arizona and Phoenix, just playing around, just trying to watch all the YouTube content I possibly could to learn how to weld. And then I never finished that Honda Ruckus.
Oh.
Yeah, I spent like 8 or 10K in parts. It was ready to be built and just be a really eye-catching, fun little scooter. And never built it. I moved states to Colorado. That's 5 years ago. And never really got proficient with TIG in Arizona either. Got here, I started doing metal art. Metal art turned into getting a job as a welder because my license didn't transfer from the current job that I was doing in Arizona, which was x-ray tech at a hospital. And metal art to crappy welding jobs, grinding mostly and not welding. And then found a couple of good employers that gave me a chance, and I put in the work and I learned as much as I could. And the attention to detail and the aesthetic and the crazy mentality I have in my mind allows me to try and really just shoot for the stars on a lot of things that I attempt to do, no matter what it is. I get go all in, and usually it's a love-hate relationship every time. But and then machining, man, if you're a welder, you need to be able to machine, in my opinion. And that's if you're a welder, you will need machining at some point, whether it's yourself or it's outsourced, no matter what. It's just you got to fix a part, or you need somebody to machine something that you need to weld onto, an assembly or whatever. So that turned into manual machining. Again, broke me. Grizzly manual mills, grizzly little baby lathes, and just trying to learn, just trying to figure it out. I loved it. I loved it, and I hated that I couldn't afford anything nice. And, that turned into making a couple of little CNC machines and understanding G code a little bit, and, CAM and CAD and Fusion 360. And then, just working for different people. I got into machining. I've talked a previous employer into buying like a smart machine tool. It's a SM1165, a big 3-axis VMC. And that was the first machine that I ever touched the controller on. And that was like a year ago. And I've been hooked ever since. I absolutely love it. So
That's so cool. I had no idea you were in Arizona. And actually, that makes more sense because it seems like for some reason, the ruckus scene out here is like giant. I see them all the time down here in Tucson. I know there's, Machines up in Phoenix that makes all the rims and stuff.
And that's another thing. Evan at FLP Engineering, he's here in Colorado. I bought a rear disc conversion from him for my ruckus all that time ago. And then as soon as I moved here, he's like, "Hey man, come by the shop." And I was like, "No way. I got to meet Evan at FLP." And now I talk to him all the time. He has a VF2 and he has a lathe and he has a little TM1 and he just kills it, man. He makes some seriously cool parts. So
awesome. Yeah, that's super cool. So where does the Fadal fit in all this? Because the last video that I was just watching was the Civic blow-off valve adapter, and that was a Fadal.
So that's a VMC 15 Fadal at a previous employer's shop. It's 3P Performance. He has 3 different companies: 3P Performance, AR Design, and FDR Fab. So it's a lot of fabrication components as well as stainless steel raw materials, tubing wise and flanges and whatnot for building different exhausts. And I was working there doing just general CAD CAM prototyping of different automotive fabrication components and whatnot for different platforms like BMW, and the Honda is one of them, and just new heavy hitter cars that came out there that are popular at the moment, just trying to prototypes and do some R&D on just simplistic parts that would sell. So that was the Fadal. Definitely was weird going from a Fanuc control to a matrix green colored writing flashing by every time I drip fed. So it was a weird control to pick up, but great machine, man. I have a massive amount of respect for Fadals. Just a massive amount of respect.
So I've never run one, but I know a lot of people seem to really like them. And, most of the parts and relays and all that stuff is off the shelf components, so you can keep them running. All that stuff.
Fadal CNC has everything you need to replace any internal stuff. And I mean, you can literally pick one of these machines up, for 10 grand. 10 grand, and you have 15 horsepower and, sometimes 75 to 10K on the spindle. I mean, it's a capable machine. It's a little rocky when you start going above 100 inches a minute, but it'll put in work below that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. So you were talking about your Grizzlies. Let's talk about your machine tool path. Like what did you go from there to where you are now and everything in between?
So started off on like a G05 something, some little mini mill, just a little vertical benchtop mini mill. Just trying to learn how to tram in vices and try and learn how to, make sure the head was trimmed and just understand like all the basics of machining, the things that you look up a video and this is kind of how it happens. And as soon as you start removing material, you're like, wow, the possibilities are endless. And that's on a manual machine. So you're there's some amazing machinists out there, don't get me wrong, but I'm not the amazing manual machinist, square parts for sure. So, and then that turned into a little lathe. And then I was actually selling parts over the last few years in very small runs here and there, maybe once or twice a year. And they were torch holders. They weren't the current one. It was an older style with a detent, just a simple torch holder. And I did some welding hand rests back in the day and some stuff like that. And that all required me to have some of these tools for, just milling down threaded standoffs and yada, 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 just trying to, and it was a grind. Like I did waste way too much work for what it was. I was absolutely making no money. Looking back at it, I am just, oh man. But yeah, so the little lathe, another little Grizzly lathe, I don't even know. I bought a CNC converted Grizzly G0704 from an Instagram buddy and never ran it. It sat on a pallet and then I sold it. I didn't want to convert it. Spindle RPM was too low and I didn't want to mess with trying to re-gear it or, pulleys and blah, blah, blah. So sold that off and then I got into CNC routers and it was like, okay, this is a 3-axis little CNC router is shaped Poco. And, I could make sheet metal parts on this thing. I can have some fun. I can be creative. It's off the shelf. It's cheap. It's affordable and it works. So I ran those for a long time, just making different sheet metal components and forming those components on just sheet metal brakes, box and pan brakes, and welding those up for practice and kind of doing different stuff like that. But, I try and machine, but it's a 150-pound machine. You could do some HSM, but like your wall finishes looked like absolute poo and they're just horrible. And I always hated it. I was like, how can I make this 150-pound machine like leave really nice wall finishes? And I just like fought with myself all the time. And it's just not going to happen. But for the most part, that kind of got my foot in the door. I kind of understood how to program in Fusion and yada, yada, yada. And that turned into running that first Smart SM1165 machine. I think it's a variant of a Samsung. They're pretty small, so I don't know how many people have actually heard of them, but they're pretty decent machines. And that was a Fanuc control. And usually I say Fanuc, but I'm trying to correct myself. But if you call Fanuc, it says Fanuc, so it's like kind of hit or miss. So I go back and forth on that. So I apologize if I'm upsetting anybody. But yeah, touching a real controller and, a real jog shuttle and like, ooh, it was so exciting. It was so exciting to me, tool changers and, not retouching off every single tool because it's going in a little collet and not a tool holder. And like, man, it just was amazing. And it unleashed my creativity. I was just like, what can I make with this thing? And I love pushing a 3-axis machine to do parts that shouldn't look easily can, but like they don't look like they were just a traditional 3-axis machine with like just a bunch of surfacing work and stuff like that. I love that. And then that I left that place. That was right about COVID, when COVID hit, and then on to the automotive fab shop. And then from there, just took the risk, just jumped on I actually bought a Tormach, an 1100 MX. I'm not going to say anything super negative about it right now. It just wasn't the machine for me. I had some little quirks that I just couldn't get over. And now it's a foam monster. The machine's foam for a living. And bought a Haas mini mill, same thing. There's some quirks about it that weren't for me, but it's putting in work and it's removing material and it's been a good machine. I ordered a second one. So that's kind of where we're at.
That's awesome. Well, congrats. That's a big step. I mean, you'll have 3 machines pretty soon.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I see some amazingly talented dudes making some awesome parts on Tormach machines. But for my style of machining, it just doesn't work for me. If I surfaced everything, no problem. But there's a little things. And again, Tormachs are fantastic for the entry-level guys to professionals. So don't think that I'm trashing that brand or company by any means. It's just, it's for you or it isn't for you. So, yeah. But they've made some amazing strides and some awesome products, and they've been very innovative, and they've brought machine tools to people that couldn't necessarily buy a $100,000 machine. So they definitely have their place. So, and I know there's a lot of guys that probably listen to this that run Tormachs, and awesome guys. Like, they're awesome machines. But it's hard to go from a big, heavy machine back to a Tormach. That's the hard part about it. It's hard going from a big, heavy machine back to a mini mill. So,
oh yeah, totally.
Harmonics and lightweight machines. There's always something that you can look at and you don't like.
So, now that you've got the mini mill, Tormach's making your foam, what's your current product lineup look like in case somebody hasn't seen your Instagram?
So a lot of the things are just kind of random things that I make for myself and then people want. But my main products on rotation currently, for the last 2 months at least, because I've really only opened the website 2 months ago, have been a gas tungsten arc welding, a TIG torch holder, magnetic bottom mounting, top mounting TIG torch holder that's sprung and uses some ball bearings or some bearings to allow the torch neck to slide in, and then it just rests. Because the biggest problem with welding is you have nowhere to put your torch. And the second biggest problem is you spend $80 on a very nice cup for the end of your torch to weld exotic alloys like stainless or titanium, and you drop them and then they break and then you're sad. So that was my thing. I broke one too many cups, and I said, listen, I need a way to put this torch somewhere to where I'm not going to knock it off the table every time I set it up there. So that's where that came about. And then just a welding hood hook, just a magnetic hook that you put your welding hood on. I love organization, and I truly believe that efficiency, the amount of efficiency that you can get from just being organized and knowing where everything is, and having things within a hand's reach, and the lean concept, and just different old manufacturers and their way of thinking, whether they were good employers or not, or their way of thinking was special. They knew how to be efficient, and I love that. So products may seem simple, but I think they serve a massive purpose in productivity. And the last thing is just cable management pucks, just a simplistic aluminum machine puck with a magnet and a strap, and it holds cables, gas lines, yada, 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 cage work, sanitary tube welding stuff, or just trying to clean up some cords or some leads or some cables on your machine. So that's kind of what I'm working through. And I've been tied up in those things nonstop. It's been absolutely insane for a couple months now. And I'm blown away at the support from the community on Instagram and all the sales. It mind boggles me daily.
Yeah, you can't keep them in stock. It's awesome to see.
Yeah, and I'm trying. That's why I got the second machine, because I can't do production. I just can't do it. I need to be creative. I have to keep making things. I have to keep changing directions. And if I can't do that, I'm a miserable, miserable person. So the second machine was strictly just to get my mind flowing. Prototyping, fourth axis. I bought a fourth axis rotary for it. It'll just be some fun fourth axis work. Just seeing what I can do on a little machine. And I know one of the questions was, why a second mini mill? I asked myself that for a while.
That was Sequoia Manufacturing. He just wanted to say hi to you, and he asked, why a second mini mill and why not a VF2 instead? Because they're similar square footage.
First off, thank you. Hi back. You do some cool work, and I've really enjoyed following you on Instagram. I know you have a mini mill too, a mini mill as well, not a mini mill too. And why a second mini mill? Number one, I'm moving state soon. I have a little over a year here in Colorado until I move to the East Coast. I cannot sign a 3 to 5 year lease on a shop right now, or I can't leave. And I don't want some very janky, weird, probably in a bad part of town shop that would allow me to sign a 12-month lease, because I don't want a $100,000 machine sitting in an area like that if I can prevent it. So I work out of home. I work from my garage. That's where everything is done here. And a VF2 doesn't fit in a garage without serious modification. And trust me, I thought about it. I thought about boxing in some, what are they, joists or whatever they're called. Boxing that in for the spindle, taking my garage door completely off, cutting a gigantic hole for the spindle to slide through. It just didn't make sense to me on a house that I'm going to sell so quick. And I don't want to rig it in and rig it right back out. Mini mill, yes, it's definitely smaller, but it's efficient and it's low mass and it's fast and it does what I need it to do. And if you palletize it correctly, you can still be very efficient. And I would love a bigger table, but at the same time, I needed a second spindle. And I couldn't say, let's sell the mini and get a VF2, because then I'd be in the same position. I'd hate doing the same thing over and over again, and I'd have no creativity. So I hope that answers your question, and I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, I mean, and it's cool to hear that you're getting the second spindle so you can continue to be creative, because that is one thing that I really appreciate about your Instagram is, I mean, we all know that you are like knee deep in just making chips every day on these products. But to see that, you take a break, I don't know, once a week or once every couple of weeks and do something cool for yourself, it's really neat to see. Like, I know you did that Sharpie holder sometime this week.
Yeah, and even that, man, it's so basic. But now I got 200 people beating down my door saying, I want a Sharpie holder, man. It's like, cool, but You get into a Sharpie holder. What is it? It's a it's a machine piece of aluminum. How long did it take? What was the cycle time? What can I sell it for? Is it worth
Right.
me even making? You know what I mean? Are you going to buy it? At the end of the day, why don't you jump in CAD and 3D print a little thing and you put your Sharpies in there? But, I did make some, but I got a second COVID vaccine and I felt absolutely horrible, probably the worst I have in my life. And that's when I modeled that and machined it. And I just realized I did a little short run of 20 of those things. And my holes are off centered by 30 thou because I modeled it wrong because I felt like crap. So we'll go back around there.
Oh boy.
But yeah, man, like little things, I want a billet tape dispenser, just a machine tape dispenser. There's little things I just have to have. So it's fun to take a day, because it's quick if you take a day and, nothing's too complicated. You just make something for yourself. You can be proud of it. You can make a good post on Instagram and keep people excited and break up the monotony of posting the same stuff all the time. Because that's something that bothers me is when I constantly post the same content. So I try and keep it different instead of, you open some Instagram pages and it's just like the exact same picture over and over and over. And it's boring. So that's another reason why I got to get the second mini mill. I literally spent $70K on a second machine so my Instagram feed would look better.
Of course, that's the reason we all buy machines, right? So yeah, let's jump into some questions from Patreon. Jack's Precision. First of all, I wanted to step back. I just started a Patreon for the podcast to kind of help offload some of the editing and all that.
Yep.
And a bunch of you guys have stepped up, and I really appreciate it. It'll be a fantastic help. I'm sure, as you know, Brad, editing can be such a bear and just take forever. And to be able to offload
editing audio is way worse than editing video because you really have to pay attention. I have no idea how hard it is, but editing video sucks, so I'm sure audio's worse.
It's going into it. I never realized, like at first I was just trimming the front and the back and then posting it and I was like, oh, that's good enough. And then one episode, I can't remember which one it was, I was like, oh, I'll just start taking out the ums and the dead space. And all of a sudden it was 1.5 to 2 times the runtime. So like, a 2-hour podcast, it's like, well, there's 4 hours I got to sit down and edit it. And like, I'm not complaining about it, but it was one of those things that's like, man, if I'm going to continue to run my business and work my day job and do this, I've got to offload somewhere.
Absolutely.
So that was the right thing to do for sure. It's taken such a big load off it and really brought the fun back of recording these. So yeah. I just wanted to take a break. I'll do some thank yous at the end of everybody who pledged, but just wanted to let everybody know we've got a Patreon now. Any support that you guys can help with would be fantastic. It's just so I can continue to create content and hopefully bring some more stuff to bear down the road. But from Patreon, Jack's Precision asked, he wanted to know how you come up with all these color variations and patterns for your products, and do those variations slow you down?
Okay, so the color variations, Ashley anodized it. She's a local anodizer that does my work for me. She does really cool patterns and splashes and yada, yada, yada. She's super talented when it comes to that. And I stumbled upon her and started to utilize the process that she offers to kind of add a little bit of pizzazz to some of the products instead of the basic standard colors of anodize that are out there, which I do appreciate. But it's always nice to set yourself apart a little bit and be a little different. So as far as the patterns go, I only machine for toolpaths, period. It's what I like to do. And whether my machine's good enough to do it or not, it's truly what my passion is aesthetically. I machine aesthetic parts. I'm not shooting for tents. I'm shooting for it's just an aesthetic appearance that wows the viewer. And maybe I miss a lot of times, but it's at least what my goal is. And surfacing is a big part of all my things. I like to kind of stand out. And the thing is, as much as I appreciate the industry, unfortunately, you can't be that way in a lot of industries or in a lot of shops because in this specific industry, because time is money. You have to make parts and get them out the door. And that just is what it is. So not that I don't like to do that. I don't find passion in making parts for other people. I find passion in making parts for myself. So the one thing I promised myself was that if I were to do this, I would go out of my way, no matter the cycle time increase on a part, to make sure that I can set it apart. I want to set it apart from somebody else. So does it hurt me? Yes, it does. Do I care? I work twice as much, so I don't. And it's not the greatest business model, and I'm not saying my margins are poor by any means, but I am saying that I will go out of my way and I don't care about an extra 3 minutes to surface a part. That's just my mentality. Some will say, "Oh, you're losing money." I understand, but I'm also only making money because of it. So, that's the I mean, look at some of these shoe companies, and I won't bring up any names because that's all controversial. But, you know, you have designers that are getting paid massive amounts of money to create things that are different from other manufacturers. And the only, limited edition selling things, large drops from different, even small companies on Instagram that are very, baseball cards, golf stuff like that. I mean, like people love things that they can't get. So
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely seems like it.
having kind of that mentality and offering a product that may not be repeated again, or a feature or an engraving or a laser mark or something that will never be repeated again, it's a kind of that cool factor of not necessarily a collecting things, but I don't know. I just love it. I just like Toolpath, man. And it does hurt me, and it takes a few extra minutes on every single part, but that's what I went into this knowing, and it's the only way I can do it and be happy. So,
Well, and it looks great. And I think you do it intelligently where you're not trying to mirror surface everything. You are using the toolpath and the scallop from the ball mill as a aesthetic feature. So like your cycle times could be way worse than they are already if you were trying to mirror finish everything.
And I'm pushing them, I'm pushing my step over, and I'm pushing kind of that teeter totter of where am I happy with the surfacing. You start stepping over too much and you start trying to cut cycle times, and now you're moving your feed rate so fast that now you can see all of the little harmonic vibrations occurring as the tool's passing through the material. And that's another thing. I tumble my parts because I like a tumbled finish. I would love a machine that could offer a part in the finish that I desire, but that's not Haas. And maybe that's not my Haas, absolutely. And in similar Haas's that are, VF2s, yada yada yada, they make beautiful parts, but there's always something I'm going to see. Until I buy $1 million machine, there's still probably things I'm going to see. But until I buy $1 million machine, I can't send my parts to anodize without tumbling. I'm crazy. I get it. So
No, it's
things
tough
bother
for
me.
sure. And I mean, I think we've all seen that in the community of people who buy Kerns or high-end Moris or, DMGs or whatever. That's still not the magic pill to have perfect surface finishes. It's everything else, the tool paths and the feed rates. And so no matter what, I think that somebody who has your level of standards is always going to have something you want to push and something you want to experiment with. And, it's just a process. And I think you're doing the best you can.
And don't get me wrong, I love Haas. I love their control. I think they make a great machine, and it's basically the industry standard because it's affordable. A lot of people can get financed on these machines, and they're not looking for 900 years of business experience before you can actually get something. Brother, come on, man. I want a brother. But yeah, so they're great machines, and you can do amazing things with them. I have learned I have unrealistic expectations when it comes to finishes, and I'm never going to be happy unless I sat there and with 2,000 grit sandpaper and went bankrupt and out of business on one part. Then I'd maybe be happy with it. But there's nothing that I'm going to truly be happy with. So I have to understand what realistic expectations are and look at the process not only as individual operations, but as a whole, as a final result. Because I need to tumble the part. I need to, when that part is finished, after it's tumbled and after it's cleaned and after it's coated and after it's boxed, it's a beautiful part. It looks nice. I'm proud of that part. And maybe I'm not proud of each process, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what somebody gets in their hands when they open a box. So I've got to be realistic because a mini mill is $30K with 25 to $30K worth of options. It's a very affordable, cheap machine, and it's light, and but it kicks butt too. So I like it.
Yeah. So we've got some questions on the mini mill, but before that, keeping on the pattern of talking about anodizing, we had a few more questions on that. Emery Rempel asked, how does he make his anodizer's life easy to get the best results possible? So what steps are you taking so that Ashley's life is easy and that you guys both feel happy with what comes out?
So I went through a lot of anodizers. I'm never happy with any of them, and I'm very picky, and Ashley knows that. She knows I'm very picky. And she probably doesn't like me a lot of times. But most anodizers don't care, and I don't like most anodizers. They slide your parts across. That's why machine finishes are a joke when you take them to a crappy anodizer, because they'll just slide them right across the table and then throw them in a tank, and now you have scratches underneath your coating, and you look horrible at the end of the day. It's like, why would this guy coat this part that looks like this? And it's like, I didn't do it. So how do I make my anodizer's life easy? One, I want to discuss holes. How are you racking these parts? What holes are you racking them off of? Do you need me to put a certain feature in the part to make your life easier so there are not any rack marks and there aren't any damaged threads from titanium racks or anything like that? So the biggest thing is just communication, man. That's the biggest thing with me, period, in life in general, is communicate. I don't care who it is. Like, it's the gateway to solving all problems. So if there's a problem or there's a blemish on a part, we just talk about it and we say, how can we avoid this? Obviously, pulling parts out of your machine, depending on what kind of cutting fluid you're running, and then just throwing them in a box and taking them to your anodizer. I don't know. It's going to be hit or miss there. They don't like a whole bunch of oil in all their holes and whatnot. So I pull my parts out of the machine and I put them in little egg crates. And then as soon as I have enough of them, those parts go in the tumbler and then they get tumbled for typically 30 to 40 minutes. And as soon as they come out of the tumbler, they go in the ultrasonic cleaner and then all the holes get cleaned out of them. And then they get sat on just chucks, like medical chucks, and they dry. And then they go back into egg crates and then they get saran wrapped and then they go to Ashley. So obviously they get etched there and they get cleaned again, but I just want to make sure that there's not any chips in any holes or there's not anything going on that could cause any issues or any bleed out. Blind holes are a big problem when you're anodizing, because if you get acid and the acid bath gets in there and then you dip it in dye and then it leaks out, now your part looks like not the way you want it to look like. So there's a lot of things, man. There's a lot of things you got to go out of your way to do to make sure you have through holes, or you got to be a little tricky or come up with little things that may not be super aesthetically pleasing, but they allow for a quality part at the end of the day. So you just got to think about that. I mean, you know, some of these fixture plates and stuff, they're anodized. There's forethought on tapped holes that get set screws that fill those tapped holes, and then that plate gets racked off of those holes, and then those set screws go into the part. So just thinking about it and bringing clean, nice, quality parts to your anodizer is going to give you the best result. And I can assure you, if you're having problems, it may not be you. So you might want to swap it and just try someone else.
Definitely. Yeah, it's such a hard part of this industry because it's such a low value added process. Like, it might be a $10,000 part for you, but it's a $100 lot charge for them. And so to get them to care an equal level is very hard to do.
Absolutely. In general, to be blunt and maybe hurt some feelings, I just feel like quality is like not where I'd like it to be in the world in a lot of things. I mean, taking quality in a process is different than losing money and going out of business. And I just wish that a few more people, not in the Instagram community. I love everybody in the Instagram community and anybody who's listening to this, but you walk into some shops and you're just like, man, I just don't know how you sell that. Or, I don't know how, it's just horrible. And it's like, that might be a 2-minute part for you, but I wouldn't buy it.
Oh, yeah.
It's, so and that's not just in welding or machining, it's in grocery, baggers at the grocery store. Why do they care about their job? They don't, they're not making any money. It's like, man, I don't know. I take so much pride in everything I do, and I love trying to push other people to take pride in what they do as well. Whether you know what you're doing or you're faking it till you make it, I won't claim to know anything, and I will never call myself a machinist. I just like making things, I don't know. I love quality. I love USA made, if that even means anything anymore in a lot of aspects. Even USA made stuff, man. Like, it's not what it was.
Yeah. Well, and then that's a point I've made to a few friends. Like, they'll complain about, like, oh, we lost these parts to China or whatever. And it's like, man, if you're not doing it better or, higher quality or if there's no benefits to them coming to you, why do you expect it? Like, they're not going to come to you just because you're in the US.
Absolutely.
Like, the US made used to mean better quality, better turnaround, better customer service. And like, if you're not offering any of that stuff, you don't really deserve the work over them.
Yeah, I love the 50s and 60s mentality, like the beautiful refrigerators and like all the iconic antique stuff that people restore now. That was just, man, you'd go to work and you'd sit there and like it would be, details and like true craftsmanship. Craftsmanship. I love that word. I love that word. That word gives me chills because if I get a message and somebody says like you're a true craftsman, that is the absolute highest form of a compliment for me because that word means everything to me. I don't even think anybody knows what craftsman even means anymore. Like in newer, they think it's a tool at Lowe's that got taken over by Sears. Like I
Right.
really I love taking the pride, and that's why I love the community and everybody who listens to this and everybody I've listened to on this. Here I am saying and I'm like, oh man, he's gonna have to edit all those out.
No, dude, I pay somebody to do that now.
Yeah, so for sure.
But before we leave the anodizing train,
Yep.
Fort Manufacturing, one of his questions was, did you ever try your own anodizing?
Yes, I did. And I figured out real quick that either I need a different space to do it in or I need to pay somebody because it's horrible. It's not that bad. It's just like there's some processes that I see people doing at home and I'm just like, man, it's dirty processes, very dangerous, lots of chemicals, like the acid. Like I anodized in my kitchen, and I was like, this is kind of weird. I feel like I'm making some illegal sellable materials here on my stove. But yeah, no, I did it. It turned out pretty dang good. I said, okay, I'm pretty happy with the process. I understand how it's done, but it's not for me. And you have to come to a point adding processes that you want to take control. I have a lot of issues with control in manufacturing, not control in life, maybe, but more so manufacturing. And I really want to be able to control every process, the foam, the boxing, the packaging, the printing of this, the designing, the everything that people look at you and they're like, there's no way you're making money, man. Like, there's no way that you're doing all this by yourself and making money. And I'll say, it takes 90% of the 24-hour day, but it's being done. And I don't know how to let go. I can't let go of that. I can't let go of the control of the full process. And anodizing is one of those things I had to let go of. I make more parts in case some come back that I don't like, and then those parts get sold as blemished. So things happen.
So his other two questions were, what's the best thing you've outsourced, and how did you find your packaging material supplier?
Best thing I've outsourced is probably anodize. The easiest thing that comes to mind right now. Coating your parts is absolutely, in my opinion, if you're selling a product, 100% necessary. You need to offer a nice quality coated part. And there's a lot of people that offer raw parts. That's fine. I don't, because I don't like people posting pictures and tagging me in them. And after 2 weeks of having a raw part, it looks like that raw part went on like a downhill mountain bike trip, and crashed a few times. And it's just like, coating's protective and it really adds a whole new dynamic to a product. If you can afford it, if you're in the position. But at the end of the day, anodize is $110 to $115 for a rack. And that rack can hold a lot of parts. And if you break that down across 100 parts, that's $1 a part. That's $1 a part that you could get 75% more of your audience purchasing your parts if you coated them and changed the aesthetic slightly. So it's so the anodize outsource wise, and then packaging, I do some of it myself. Obviously, I'm doing the foam. I'm doing some of the header tags for the bags. The boxes are outsourced to a company called Next Day Flyers, and they're out of Ohio. They just, you design your box and they do your thing, and they're kind of expensive and kind of a necessity for me. And it's sometimes hard to juggle whether it's worth it. But right now it is. So
that's good. I'm glad that you can do it because the packaging does look great.
No, I appreciate it. It's fun, and it's the whole aesthetic thing. Like 3 extra minutes making tool pass, a couple extra dollars on packaging. Is it going to make or break me? No, but I think it's aesthetically worth it to the customer, and the unboxing experience is my favorite, you know. Funny thing, back to the Ruckus thing in the beginning, there was an exhaust that I wanted to buy forever. It was a Yoshimura exhaust that I wanted to buy for the Ruckus because I thought it looked like the coolest thing ever, and I was too broke, and I could never afford it. And I just bought a Kawasaki Z125 Pro that's basically like a Grom, and I just bought it to literally, in between cycles, ride wheelies around the neighborhood. And that was its only purpose in life. The Ducati is the cruiser. So I was like, man, I can afford a Yoshimura exhaust for this thing, so I'm just going to buy one. I could make one, probably nicer, but I always wanted it, and I loved the brand. I got it last night. I installed it. It should have took me 10 minutes. It took me an hour and a half, and I couldn't get my hands in some places that it required you to get your hands, like a lot of things. And then after the process was over, I mean, it sounds good, but it sucked putting together. The fitment was horrible. The bolt like the alignment and everything was terrible. And I was like, okay, well, I bought one. I'll never buy one again. It sounds good. So it fulfilled that, like, you know, teenage dream of wanting a Yoshimura exhaust way back in the day when I raced dirt bikes. But that's the point, is like, it's a great product. They sell a lot of stuff for a lot of bikes and everybody loves them. But when you really get your hands on it and you're in the manufacturing world, not only in welding, but also in machining, you can pick everything apart. And it's horrible. So,
yeah. Oh yeah.
Not
yeah,
to go off on a tangent there, but
no, and that's from a company that, I mean, I haven't bought anything Yoshi in a really long time, but at least when I had my first ZX6R, like, it was top quality. You know, the Japanese are supposed to be those craftsmen, and so
absolutely,
that's disappointing to hear for sure.
Yeah, and it might just be a lot of their mufflers are for multiple bikes and smaller bikes, and they just change the header design a little bit, and they probably alter a bracket, but it's like, for $600, you know, $600 is a lot of money for something so simplistic that just makes my neighbors mad.
Oh yeah,
so,
well, especially on a inexpensive bike like that, you know, if you spent $20,000 on a ZX10, $600 is like, oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I spent like $25,000 on or maybe not that, maybe 22 on a Ducati Hyper Motard, and I just love the aesthetic, like the bird, like, you know, transformer aesthetic of the bike. And if I spent, you know, a tenth of that on an exhaust, like, I expect it to be the same quality that the name on the bike is. You know, it's like, I mean, that was a fifth of the cost of the bike. You know, the Z125 is a $5,000 or a $4,000 ish after tax and title, blah 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 bike. Like, that was a quarter of the bike on an exhaust. Yeah. Come on, guys.
Exactly.
You know, so, oh yeah.
So the Michael Carr asked, he wanted to hear how you price your products. So what forces your decisions, or what steers your decisions on the pricing product points?
Okay, so number one, I went into this wanting to develop and sell a product to the blue collar industry of people that couldn't afford massively overpriced stuff. Now, my products aren't cheap, but they sell, and a lot of people buy them that are all blue collar welders and they can't afford them. So I never wanted to make something that was unobtainable for the everyday individual. You know, that's why, like, bigger companies like knife makers, they make a really expensive knife, but they also typically have something that you can buy from them, so you can just support them and own something from them instead at a cheaper price point. For example, Grimsmo, awesome knife, but he also sells a pen and other things. You know, you can get something from him typically, even if you can't afford a knife. You know, pricing's dictated off of cycle time and how long does it take to make. What is my hourly rate? You know, like, and that's constrained to what machine is it? How fast are you pushing that machine? What's your material removal rates? Like, how quick can you make this product? And that's the tricky thing, because if I was on a different machine, let's say a Brother Speedio or something, I can make that product 5 times faster than I can make it on a mini mill. But does that mean that product should be 5 times cheaper? Or does that mean that Brother cost 3 times as much as a mini mill, so it should remain the same price, even though it's faster? It doesn't matter to the customer that your machine's faster. It matters that you're capable of making a part faster and more efficient, so you shouldn't have to charge less for it, depending on the mentality. But I really try and just go off of an hourly rate and however long it takes me, plus materials, plus a little bit of profit. Like, I can tell you guys, these torch holders, they sell for $140. $140, they're 3 pieces. It's a lot of runtime. It's a lot of surfacing. It's a lot of little tiny components that make up the assembly. And I'm not getting rich on these at all. But they do pay the bills. But I
Right.
do think they're worth it because I see things that are similar, that are basic 2D, no creativity, no surfacing, no complex geometry, and not a whole lot of thought. And they're not a lot cheaper than my product. So I want to provide something that's over the top. And a lot of people say it's cheap, which is fine. And maybe there's some that say it's expensive, which I totally understand. But you have to understand the value of the product and what it adds to your everyday productivity to actually like justify, is it worth me spending this? In some cases, if you're running a little number 5 cup and you're welding aluminum all day, who cares about a number 5 cup? It's $2. If you break it, who cares? Typically, you can't break them even if you wanted to. But if you're welding with a big ceramic cup or a big Pyrex cup and you don't want to drop it, and you want a throne because that paintbrush that you're holding in your hand, welding a bunch of parts up, is super important to you and you take pride in what you're doing, maybe you can justify spending $140 on an aluminum product that holds your torch at your table. So it just totally depends. I try and be as fair as possible, and it's all dictated by how much does it cost for material, anodizing, hardware, all the little components that make up the assembly, and what's the cycle time. And I don't necessarily want to run my machine at 100% spindle load 24 hours a day because I'd like to be a little nicer to it. So, maybe that fluctuates my product cost by $5. Well, so I don't have a great answer, but I just try and be as fair as possible. And it's really just how fast can I carve that part out of a piece of material.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you said earlier, it's not just that, it's also the cleaning and tumbling. And I mean, there's a lot that goes into your parts. So it makes
Yeah,
sense.
if I worked 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, I couldn't keep up. I couldn't do what I'm doing. Like, I respect the grind and I love the hard work that's put into building a small business. And people think, oh man, like, you're selling these little simplistic aluminum things and like you're making a lot of money and like you're working out of your garage and you don't have a lot of overhead. And it's like, I place $500 tooling orders every week. Like, you know, I mean, like I've reinvested in a lot of equipment. I just bought a fiber laser, a second down payment on a mini mill. Like I have to buy a bunch of Lang tooling for the 4th-axis rotary. I need some orange vices. Like, guys, I'm making $4,000 a year. I'm putting, X amount back into the business. I'm paying my bills. I'm not
Right.
going on fancy trips. I'm not flying first class. I
Yeah.
mean, I live a pretty simplistic life. I just like tools so I can buy more and write them off.
I don't think anybody who follows you thinks that either. I mean, maybe there's the trolls out there, but anybody who's watched your Instagram for any length of time will know that you clearly care about what you're doing and care about making a great product, and it's not about getting rich quick.
Absolutely. No, I don't care about money. I just care about continuously doing what I love. And as long as I can afford to maintain the tooling that requires me, that is required to do what I love, as long as I can keep making the payments, I'm good by just scraping by. I mean, at this point, I put in a lot of work. I'm trying to build a brand. I do want to get into a position to where maybe I can do something fun and life's not as stressful. But currently, I mean, I try and be as transparent as I possibly can on Instagram. I help absolutely everybody who asks me a question. I give away any secrets that anybody wants to know because I don't truly believe in secrets. I think trade secrets are kind of nonsense, not to offend anybody. But if we can advance the next generation in half the time that we advanced ourselves, then what they're going to be able to accomplish is going to be tremendously just levels and levels above of the next. You know what I mean? Like, if you can just say, okay, this is what you need to do, boom, 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 now you're as good as I am and you're half my age. Let's see what you can do when you're my age. That's how we're going to innovate. That's how we're going to keep manufacturing alive and keep going in an upward direction. And I truly believe that you just stop and take the time to share something with somebody that has a question, and you can change the world. And YouTube and the online content and what you can learn by just typing a few buttons in on your iPhone is amazing. You can do anything you want. I truly believe, besides mental limitations, mental health limitations, or severe physical limitations, you can do anything you want. I don't care what it is. Like, I mean, you can do it. The information's out there. I'm here to help you if you guys need anything. Like, you guys can do whatever you want. It's just all about drive and belief, discipline, not inspiration, not motivation, discipline. Make it happen, like really just get after it.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. And every time I've helped anybody in the community, like, you get back what you give, and it's so worth it. Whether it's just feeling good about helping somebody, or they refer somebody to you later down the road that helps you out, or just being a community really is so important.
No, it's amazing. It doesn't matter what the industry is or like what the group or the community is built around, whether it's Instagram or whatever, man. Like, you have communities for like special effects makeup, or like communities for machining, welding. Like, it's freaking so cool. Leatherworking, like, and you just have these little group of people that all follow each other and all kind of like get better with each other and just build off of each other. It's spectacular. Do you know who Eddie at Nueve Precision is?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was over at Eddie's yesterday. I went over to his shop, and if you guys don't know Eddie, he has a home shop. He's had a previous business, a very successful previous business, but he has a home shop, and it just looks like a really nice garage. Then you walk inside, and it's a full-on, legit machine shop. He has a Haas lathe, and he has a DMG 5-axis mono block, and it is an amazing machine. He was showing me, running me through like 100% rapids and whatnot, and just seeing how fast this thing indexes, and it's just incredible. But the point is, I wanted to go to Eddie's, and I wanted to pick his brain about some fourth axis questions I had. And I told him, like, I just charge me your hourly rate, and he wouldn't. He obviously he wouldn't. He just said, pay it forward. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. I would have gladly paid him $600 for the time that I spent at his shop preventing him from making money yesterday. But he didn't care. He just said, pay it forward. And that's what I mean. Somebody with his knowledge. He's a very talented guy, and I look up to him, and he does some amazing stuff with what he has. And he'll take 4 hours out of his day to help me try and wrap my head around something that I'm thinking about and not even take my money. And that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. That's what we need to be for the next generation. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we need to focus on, is just helping each other as a community. It's not about competition. It's not about like, if you have a quality product, and you know what I mean, competition, I think, is healthy, as much as it may irritate you and aggravate you, that you have to try and like fight with somebody else and like who can make the better product. But it's driving you to improve. It's driving you to increase what you know and where you want to go. And it's just lighting a fire and saying, let's just keep fighting back and forth, and whoever makes the best product wins. And I love that, because I won't stop. You know what I mean? I will keep improving until you can't catch up anymore. And that's kind of the goal, like, and that's healthy, even if you're friends. Like, let's push each other. So
Totally. So that jumps into one of our questions, or you talking about social media and the community. P. Sokoff asked, what role does social media play in your business? It seems like you like sharing, or I'm sorry, it seems like you are sharing often about what's going on in the shop.
So I like companies that are fully transparent with the process in which they are manufacturing their product. I like buy into that. Like, I enjoy seeing it being made and packaged and then the face of the company. Some of these companies, they have an Instagram page. They never post. You don't really know what's going on. You don't know if they exist. You don't know if I send you my money, are you going to actually send me a product, or are you going to disappear? So I like active social media presences that are like, you can get a hold of them. You don't have to feel like if you email them, you're going to get ignored for 3 weeks. Send them a DM. I have a lot of DMs, guys. I got 1,000 unread messages. Okay, I'm going to work my way through those, but I do answer any questions that are important at the time. So social media is 100% driving my small business. I don't sell to anybody else. Every sell is from social media. There might be the occasional traffic across some SEO on Google or something that falls in. And I have had multiple distributors want to sell my products, but just what they want to take off the top. I'm not pricing my products to take 30 off the top, so I can keep it affordable. I can't rack them up to have other people sell them for me. But 100% social media driven. I love trying to post the process and show you guys what is going on and how much effort and and quality and care that I put into the process to hopefully show my customers that when they receive the product, they kind of know what went into it and they can appreciate that, because it's really easy not to appreciate what goes into something. Some people think you can just run over to the machine, toss a chunk of aluminum in there like 419 showed the other day, push a button on your phone, and then it just pops apart out and you can catch it in the air and you're like, there we go. That's within tolerance.
Yeah, easy peasy, right?
Yep. Yep. And it's funny because some people think that's how CNC machining works. And
I've definitely had a few customers that are just like, I had one that was a mechanic and he was like, well, yeah, you just like put the model in the machine and hit go, right? And I'm like, yeah, and you just like throw wrenches at the bike and the bike's fixed, right? And he was like, oh, okay, maybe I was a little off.
Oh, yeah. That's good, man. Yeah,
so,
your little plug-in deal and pushing it and figuring out what code you're throwing. Oh, let's just erase that. That fixes the problem. Oh, yeah. Rod knock? Boop, erase.
Yeah, no more rod knock. It's that simple.
That's funny.
So one of his other questions was, will pre-ordering be your continued way of sales?
Pre-ordering was just an outlet to get people to be able to purchase the product without constantly getting their cart sniped out and checkout. Because when I drop it, like, there's a lot of people on the website at one time, and I don't have the product to support everybody who wants the product. So I initiated pre-orders specifically just to be able to get people's hands on the product and a guaranteed slot that they'd receive something. That's overwhelming. I did 800 parts in 16 days, and that was a lot. And 800 parts in 16 days, like, you're thinking, some 800 parts in 16 days is nothing on some things, but like, man, some of the parts that I've had to do are a lot of work, multiple ops, like just a lot of building up and breaking down and a lot of changing tools and a lot of different soft jaws. And these aren't palletized parts. I'm working out of vices. I have pallets and they're ready to go, but like, I like vices. I don't know. I have a problem with vices because I don't like having to pull a pallet and then put a vice on the table to get an idea out of my head. Like, That's why the second mini mill, I'll have some 0-point system or something in there to where I can just pop a pallet on. Like, even like the picture you posted yesterday, I think, of the whole setup with all the different little things on there, and everything has retention knobs and just drops in, or ball locks or whatever they are on that setup. But yeah, this is vice work. This is pretty intense for me. Op one, sure, I can strip parts. I do a lot of long strips of parts and slot them, and then I just break them apart and flip them into jaws. But currently, with my current setup, it's the most efficient way for me right now. So
yeah, well, it's not like you have a VF4 or VF6 where you have like 8 vices. You've got a mini mill, so you don't have that much space on that table.
Yeah. I have 2 max, and I can barely hit travel on both sides and keep my probe in the machine. And I can't even probe face mills without pulling the vice out. So, mini mill life.
Yeah. Hey, but you're doing your best. That's definitely tough. I know that a lot of people might think like, oh, that's 50 parts a day. But like you said, it's not just one part that you're running endlessly. It's a bunch of different setups, a bunch of different parts.
Yeah, so, and I can get a lot done out of vices. I really do like vices. I wish that the mini mill had a little bit more wide travel so I could run a bigger dual station, or I can run a dual station with decent station openings, and I could get a lot done. But I still have 1.5-hour cycle times. I'm never opening and closing doors every 2 minutes. I model and reply to emails and pack and do everything else while that machine's running. So that robot's doing its own thing. 1.5-hour cycle times, it's not a lot when you look at like Yates doing 24-hour cycles on the 4th axis with the tombstone and all that awesome stuff. But he's working a full-time job too.
Right. Oh yeah.
And that sucker's turning because he ain't there to turn it. So, and that's awesome. And I love what he's doing.
And an hour and a half is better than 15 minutes. I mean, Absolutely. If you were running, that would be terrible.
Yeah, 15 minutes is horrible. Longest cycles for me are 2 hours. Shortest cycles for me are 28 minutes or something like that. So it's not horrible. I have time. I can run to the store. I can run and grab lunch if I have to, which I don't most of the time. But I can get out of the house. It's not like, oh, the machine turned off. I get a notification on my phone and I'm, 2 hours away from getting back. That would kind of bother me. And I'm getting better, but a mini mill is what it is. Unless I was doing like super crazy weird die work, or mold work or whatever on a mini, which I wouldn't do anyways. Like, getting 24-hour cycle times out of a mini mill, you're a magician. I think that would be pretty difficult.
Yeah, it definitely would. So
even 12 hours.
Oh, but yeah. Well, and maybe if you had a fourth with a tombstone or something like that.
But the Z-axis constraints are so freaking, I mean, like I have 10 inches of Z-axis travel on the Mini, and that's 5 inches. Spindle nose to table is 5 inches. So the spindle nose sits off the table 5 inches and 10 inches above that. Then you can go 3 inches above your tool change position, but it's like you could do a small fourth. You could do a small tombstone in a fourth. I think I'm going to work off of an unsupported tombstone without like a tailstock or whatever they're technically called. Yeah. Just a shorter one hanging off of the fourth with just 4 faces on it to do certain things. But as for getting crazy, a VF4 with the 2 vices, 2 pallets, and a fourth, all with room to spare, that'd be awesome. But the time it takes for that machine to move through all those work coordinates it's pretty extensive too.
Oh yeah,
that's why I love a small table like on a Brother or like a Fanuc Robo Drill or something like that, where you're just like Japanese made, crazy fast, awesome, precise, like just they last forever, and like you can go from point A to point B. And what is your Brother sub 1 second chip to chips tool changes? Is it sub 1?
I think they're 2 seconds, 2.2 or 2.4 chip to chip.
Still,
yeah,
it's chip to chip.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah. So when you're proofing your programs, just a quick question for you: like, what are your rapids set at, and like how? I mean, because you could just miss something so quick on those machines.
Yeah, I typically I've got a 5 position knob, and I'm at like I don't know 3 or 4. Like I use the minimum Z that Fusion posts out quite a bit, and that, like I know like worst case, if I rapid a tool through a part, it'll suck, but it's not going to break anything besides the tool and my ego. But like, it's the Z stuff that I'm really worried about. Like running a tool, like accidentally forgetting to put an offset in and running that spindle into something would be catastrophic. Because
absolutely,
2 G's of acceleration, that is going to punch whatever part is in there as hard as it possibly can. So yeah,
I can imagine.
It's scary, but it's nice too, because once you get used to it, you start going to other machines and you're like, oh man, I got all the time in the world to prove this out. Like that Z's going to take a while to get down to that part.
I know. I'm sitting here at 5% rapids with my finger on the e-stop, and I'm like, oh. The machine's moving at like 5 inches a minute. Yeah, and you're sitting here like turned all the way down, moving at 200 inches a minute.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. Like I know for sure I could be more careful, but when I'm trying to prove out as many parts as I have been, I kind of have to balance that. Like all of my time spent in the shop is more or less proving stuff out. Like I rarely have more than a few hours total of runtime in a day. It's more programming and running a bunch of different parts. So for me, getting through that proving out stage and just feeling comfortable in my post and the posted code is unfortunately where I have to be.
Yep. No, totally. When you get to a point where your tools are touched off correctly, and your work's touched off right, and you kind of know what's going on, and you got to really not be paying attention to send anything through anything. So
yeah, and like I use distance to go, and I read through the code, and there are ways to be very safe while machining and still be fairly quick.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. And it's every time I talk to somebody, it's not if you're going to crash your machine, it's when you're going to crash your machine. And I get that, but like I'll check 3 or 4 times to make sure that I'm not going to crash anything. But it's still fast, I mean, probing, man. I went from using a Heimer to probing, and it is amazing. Oh my gosh, I can switch between jobs in like 3 seconds. Literally 2 minutes, I'm on to the next thing. And it's so nice. And you think, oh, well, all you have to do is just jog your X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 0, 0, 0. But it's like, man, complex webs or rectangular blocks or bores. It's like, it's a little bit more. You got to break out the calculator, to do a little bit of math on some of these things. And the probe it's just never buy a machine without a probe.
Yeah. Well, I tell people all the time, like second ops where I'm in hard jaws, I haven't used the stop since we bought the Speedio in that machine, because I just use a caliper to rough set parts and then I probe for X.
Yep.
And it's like, does that add cycle time? Would I do that in a production environment? Probably not, unless it was, tight true position or something. But man, for 3 parts, like I'm not going to set up a stop. I hate setting up stops.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm right there
And
with
that's
you.
the other thing. It's like some things like your carrier, you got to like pull your carrier off and then probe your part because your carrier is overhanging with what your probe tip diameter is or whatever. And it's like boring a hole through and doing a 2D just cleaning it up and probing that hole for op2. Like that's one thing that has been really awesome for me is like, it's just a no-brainer. No matter what the part is or the geometry or how it's set up, it's like I can figure out a way to find a location on that part. And it's
Oh yeah.
amazing. I love it.
It's so cool. And like it makes rework, or you say you forget a hole and you're like, oh man, normally you'd have to reset up an entire op and it'd be a giant pain. Man, probe, you just like throw it back in there and you're like, I know it's going to be good.
Yep.
More or less, as long as I did my due diligence and my probe's indicated and it's calibrated, like that hole's going to be put back in and I don't have to worry about, oh, did I slightly push my part one way or the other when I put it up against the stop or whatever. So
Yep. No, absolutely, man. And I'm sure there's some guys that are like, man, I've been using a probe for 20 years or whatever.
yeah.
But it's like, to me, I'm going to be like, for the next 5 years, I'm going to be like, man, that probe's awesome. So,
yeah, I don't think it goes away too, because you start looking at like what Grimsmo's doing with it, and you can use it for so much more than just picking up work coordinates. You can measure with it. You can use it to select programs like he does with his scale patterns and all that. So there's
yeah, and I'm not sure who it was. It might have been, what is his name? He does knives too. He has a VF2. He's doing these tweezers right now. Who is that guy?
Oh, Split 141.
Split. I think
Jonathan.
it was Split. That maybe not, so don't hold me to this, but they're pressing detents into their scale, or I don't know the whole terminology behind knives, but you have to press a detent in, and that's what the blade like rides on or whatever, and people are going to be like, man, you sound ridiculous.
No, you're right. That's Grimsmo too, though. He presses it in, probes it, and then he grinds it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and I think Split is doing it too. Yeah.
Press it in, and then the probe comes over and checks it, and then it comes back and then drops it a little bit more, and it's like, amazing. I don't get into that. I'm not even checking tool break. I'm not even doing tool breakage or anything right now because I'm like right there all the time.
Right.
But just the capabilities are incredible for lights out or just walking away. I mean, and it may add 2 seconds, but it's going to save you a freaking $300 in tools when they're all taken out by that first tool breaking.
Oh yeah. Tool breakage has been such a quality of life improvement for us. Like I feel so much better walking away from the machine and just listening for really bad things. But like if I'm running a 16th inch end mill, I'm not going to hear that break.
Nope.
And then if I'm interpolating for a tap coming right after it, it's like, man, I sure hope it's still there.
Yeah, even just drills and taps, man, that's always a pain, especially depending on the part. And if you're not thread milling, and if you break something off, it just sucks, especially if it's expensive or one off.
Oh yeah.
Do you do a lot of in-probe or in-process stuff?
Not a ton. My post isn't quite set up for it yet, but I do like refined work coordinates quite a bit.
Okay.
If I need it for tight tolerance stuff.
Yep. No, that's awesome too. I haven't really messed with it a lot, but pretty dang incredible.
Oh yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we've got a few more. So P Sock Off's last one was, how do you decide when something leaves the prototype stage?
That's a good one. So I'm all about rapid prototyping. Like it either works or it doesn't work. And if it's going to take me like months to try and refine a process, that's why my products are pretty simple and I don't get into a ton of moving parts or any electrical components or anything like that at the moment, because my attention span is not that long. But I have all the respect for a lot of guys on here. They do that stuff. So how do I decide when a prototype is good enough for production?
So let me steer that. Like when, for your cable management pucks, how many iterations did you do of that? And how did you sell the first one? Was it somebody reaching out?
Like I've had really good luck with just one and done. Maybe there's a little feature I need to refine, but it's not like revision. It's like make one, it works. Do I like it? Let's add a little detail here. Let's add some texture here. Let's, put a couple of features here to make it easier to pull off. Send it. And then I posted one and then 600 of them. Now I have 600 to make. So I did 300 and they're at anodized. I got another 300 to do this week. So it's a simplistic product, but it's not offered, so if it works, I proof the process. It's not like I'm making products for an industry that I have no idea about. It's not like, oh, well, I could probably pitch this to this guy or, to this industry. I have a welding table. I have machines. I weld. I have all this stuff here. So not only am I trying to solve a problem for myself, but I can proof it out. I can run with it. I can weld some parts. I can drop some torches. I can like really figure out, is this going to work? Is it feasible? So I've been very lucky. I use 3D printing for a lot of prototyping. I don't want to waste the time and material and the setup and the aggravation and the tool life to try and bring things to life when I can just literally what people think machines do, CNC machines do, 3D printers do. Boop, and they make it happen for you. So besides the design and the slicing, that's a super awesome way to prototype and just see, do I like the size of this? Is this, is the depth of this bore correct? Like,
Right.
is this slot going to be wide enough? Like, man, and it takes an hour. It
Yeah.
takes an hour to print a little part. I'm sitting there working on something else, and then I pick it up and I say, let's make it out of metal.
Right.
And then
I completely agree. We've got a Form 2 at work, and I had a coworker come in and see that like the print time was 10 hours left. He's like, man, that seems like a really long time. I was like, yeah, but I get to go home. Like, I just come in Monday and it's ready. And I can, if it looks like garbage, I just toss it in the trash. Like, I wasted zero time.
No sweat. And then what do you have in filament costs? Like $3?
Right. Yeah. It's
maybe on a part that
so
long, a little bit more. Maybe, but
yeah, I mean, the Formlab stuff is expensive, but even then, even if it's $20 or whatever,
yep,
it saved me hours and hours of time programming it, setting it up, and machining it, only to be like, well, I hate this thing.
And there's nothing worse. I did a lot of prototyping before, panels and automotive fabrication stuff and like catch cans and like little cover panels and different things. And it's like, there's nothing worse. A 3D printer can't print me half of the stuff that I need size-wise when it comes to those applications. Revise, notch, revise, scrap. It's just horrible. It's a horrible process. So if you can avoid manufacturing anything before you test it out, whether it's in plastic or whether it's machined out of wood, you know what I mean? Like, if you can proof it out first, I can proof a product out of plastic before I machine it all day long. Does it work? Are the pivot points right? Does the math work? Is the geometry the way I want it to look? Like, I could pretty much render a product and sell it off of a 3D print. Not that I want to do that. I don't like selling anything that's not completely proofed out, but same concept, Definitely. You can get a lot of money racked up in pre-orders real quick, and you can have a lot of disappointed people if your product doesn't work, so you got to be careful.
Yeah, definitely. So the last questions we had were from, T5 Manufacturing. He said, first, do you ever sleep?
Oh, okay. Yeah, the lack of exhaustion was making me pause on that one. I do sleep. I don't think I ever sleep well. That's the tricky part, man. When I'm grinding, I'm grinding. I get up at 5 o'clock and I'm out there at 5:15, and I don't usually come in until 11 p.m. It just depends. Sometimes it's longer. Sometimes I work like way longer than I should, and it affects the family. It affects relationships. It affects everything. Absolutely 100%. And you have to have somebody with a strong mentality if you're in a relationship with a partner or whatever. And you're grinding hard now to build a future. And if they can't understand that, you're going to sever a ton of relationships if you have to just grind hard all the time mentality. It's really hard for some people to get. But I would rather work 7 days a week. That's the cool thing. I hate working 7 days a week for somebody else. I don't mind working 7 days a week for myself. What I'm doing isn't work. I enjoy it. I really love it. I love machining. I love making things. I love the process. Never am I like, I hate this or I'm sick of this. Maybe I'll feel crappy or, I'll be a little tired or something, but I'm not like, I actually say that I'm going to quit doing this quite often. I'll be honest. But the stress is pretty hardcore. And I never thought about that small business owner. Like, I used to have a really strong mentality, or like a strong negative point of view to certain employers, like telling them kind of how I think they should do their job. And I'll be honest, I was that guy. I thought I could do it better than them, but I don't think I could have. I just think it's easy to say that to an employer when you're the employee and you're not juggling all the 900 things that you don't see your employer doing that is driving them absolutely insane. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of things, whether it's organization, keeping things clean, keeping things in stock and ordering things, blah, blah, blah. Like, I can barely do it myself,
Hmm.
and juggle everything else. It's almost impossible for me. And the stress is absolutely horrible. I won't even lie. Like, I'm starting to lose some of my hair up here, man. But, but
I know
it's
the
worth it.
feeling for sure. It is all the little things that you don't really see when you're an employee.
Yep.
You never realize like how much of a pain it is, like you said, to just keep paper towels and stuff in stock.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I actually probably should call and apologize to somebody after this podcast after actually really saying it out loud, because I've been there, man. I've pushed people to limits, saying like, why do I have to do this? Like, it's, like, I'm already doing this, 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 and this. Now I have to order paper towels and do all this other stuff. Like, what are you doing? And
Right.
it's like, I understand what you're doing now, man.
Yeah.
I'll order those paper towels.
Yeah. Hindsight bias is tough. Looking back on it, you're like, well, you should know that this was going to be the outcome. But like when you're in the weeds, sometimes things are not as clear as they are in retrospect. So
No, and then just the amount of time wasted. It's absolutely insane, the amount of time I've wasted at other jobs. Going to lunch every day. Like both employee or, owner and employee going together to the hardware store. It's like you start racking these numbers up and you're just like, oh my, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars a year probably in like wasted time.
yeah.
So just thinking about that, I try and before I wouldn't mind going places and picking up parts and stuff, but now trying to do this for myself, I'm like, as soon as I leave, my day's ruined. As soon as I leave, my productivity, it's gone. I'm not going to accomplish anything. My day's wasted. So I might as well, like, as soon as I get in the truck, checking out for the day.
Right. Yeah.
And it's horrible. I try not to do it. I try and order as much as I can. I try and stay away from driving places. There's some things that I can't avoid, and that's another thing. There was a question I think I answered earlier. It said something about pre-orders. I intend on shutting pre-orders down, at least soon, because it's too many parts for me. It's too many potential possibilities for missing something quality-wise that I do not want to do, because I'm really moving fast and I look over things 3 or 4 times, but still, like, it's so easy to miss things. So yeah, I probably will be going back to just doing my production, or doing my runs, short runs, inspecting everything. Everything's perfect, and then dropping it. And people get upset because they can't get it. But I tried my best for a couple of months to try and saturate the people that were irritated that they weren't able to get anything. And unfortunately, you got to be faster than that with that little guy with the little fishing pole and the dollar bill.
Well, and pre-orders or just doing work, or sorry, getting money for work you have not done yet is super demoralizing. Like Brad, my business partner, and I have talked a lot about it. Like when customers try to prepay for stuff, and we're like, no, pay us when we're done. Because once you already have the money and then you're putting off other work that can make you money for stuff that you've already been paid for, I don't know what it is mentally about it, but it just sucks.
Well, that's the thing. It's like I took pre-orders for 2 months pretty close together. It's a lot of money that I'm responsible for, number one. And number two, like, when 2 months rolls by, I already got paid for that. Like, what am I working for? I'm working for free here. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. It's because you have the money. You made the money. Maybe you use that money to invest into a piece of equipment that may make the process faster. But at the end of the day, it's like, man, I haven't made any money in a couple of months. What's going on here?
Right.
Because I can't keep just taking pre-orders, for the next year, because then I would, like, that's how business, in my opinion, and I am not super business savvy by any means, but I've seen a lot of businesses fail, and it's by, at least in what I've seen, getting way in over their head, taking way too much business, or pre-orders have crushed businesses. I've seen pre-orders crush businesses where they take way too much on. They're never going to saturate the market. They're never going to actually get the production done on the numbers that they took on, or they don't have the equipment, or they can't reinvest, or, like, they can't outsource, or they don't have the money. And then it's like 6 months to a year down the road, you still haven't got your product, and you signed up for a pre-order with no, like, legitimate shipping date. So now you're, like, legally bound to, like, this like random possibility of receiving something, and the company can't get sued. And then, like, they just disappear, and then they steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from people. It's crazy to me.
Oh yeah. I mean, Kickstarter is pretty notorious for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't know the details, but like I feel like if you sign up for Kickstarter and there's not like an end date, like there's a lot of like a lot of little things that you can kind of legally get around as far as like the customer truly getting their money back. Like I don't know. I'm not super educated on it, so I can't speak on it, but it's just really scary to me.
I know I followed one Kickstarter that thankfully I didn't back. That was a knife maker and person on Instagram that is no longer on there, but I think he ended up taking 40 or 50 grand of people's money and just disappearing more or less.
Like what? So, is there any like?
There's no recourse because you're technically not like you're just pledging your money to these people.
That's insane.
That's insane. At least as far as I know, there's no recourse. It's yeah, absolutely.
I've just heard one too many bad stories about people losing their money on Kickstarter, and I've heard a lot of good. I've seen a lot of good. I've seen a lot of incredible things created from the support that Kickstarter offers, but I don't think I could gamble on that.
No, I think it's akin to investing in like a penny stock.
Mm-hmm.
Like that company could go out of business tomorrow, or it could become $100 a share company. Like you never know. Yep. So T5 also asked, how's the Tormach work for cutting foam and your Haas mini mill, best pros and cons?
So T5, I know you have a Tormach 1100 MX, and I've seen you make some really cool stuff on it. And I've actually picked your brain about your machine, and I've asked you if you've had the same problems that I've had on my machine. And there's been a fluctuation in quality across different machines, and we both know that. So the Tormach for foam works awesome. It's great. It's a little expensive for cutting foam, and I could easily do it on a $2,000 router. But it's just sitting there, and it might as well cut foam, if anything. It's been a good machine. I mean, just to clarify, there's some head nodding or some type of rigidity issue on my machine, just so people understand what I'm complaining about, to where when you change directions, you don't just get a tool pressure discrepancy or a tool pressure mark from changing directions, you get a gouge. You get a gouge that doesn't come out if you tumble, blast, or sand, unless you sand hard. So it's a big problem for me when, if you're doing a 2D pocket or something and you're trying to finish a floor every single time it changes directions, you have a gouge. It doesn't come out with Scotch-Brite. It doesn't come out with a bead blaster. It doesn't come out with tumbling. It's a true gouge. That tool is gouging the material. It doesn't matter if you're taking a 2 thou depth, 5 thou depth, 10 thou depth, 50% step, which I don't do, but 20% step, whatever. It's not a cam or a setup deal. It's something is going on with the machine when it changes directions. That tool is moving, and it's causing a true gouge. So that's my beef with the machine. Other than that, I think it's a fantastic piece of technology, and it's good for a lot of things. So, and I know I've seen a lot of parts from you specifically, and you've made, and I haven't seen that problem on your machine. So I can't really say what the deal is. Tormach tried to work with me on correcting the issue, and unfortunately we didn't come up with a solution. And then 3 weeks after that, the Haas mini mill was ordered. And that's the tricky thing. Again, I'm very picky, and I hope anybody who's listening knows that I'm very picky and I have unrealistic expectations. So please don't think that anything I've said negatively should impact any manufacturer that I've talked about. My standards are just unhealthy. They're unhealthy, and they cause me lots of trouble all the time mentally. So that's my own problem. But Haas mini mills have been awesome. Can you say the end of that question again? I'm sorry.
Best pros and worst cons.
Best pros and worst cons. Okay, there is a lot of cons to the mini mill, but it's still not enough to make me not order another one, I guess. But chip management, horrible on the mini. Even with the auger, I pulled the auger off because here's your thing: you have a weldment that is underneath supporting the Haas. The casting is not touching the floor on a mini mill. It's on a welded coolant tank, and then that coolant tank has feet, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So the VF2 does have a casting all the way to the floor. I don't know if any of the TMs do, and I don't know if the VF1 does, which I'm probably pretty sure that it does have a casting to the floor. But the beautiful engineers over at Haas, in all their glory, they decided to put little holes underneath the auger to return coolant back into the coolant tank, which these holes are significant perforations, and chips like to slide on right down those holes right into the coolant tank. So the auger is essentially a cheese grinder, and your coolant tank is your spaghetti, and it's horrible. You got to put I was pulling 5-gallon chips out of my coolant tank 5-gallon buckets of chips out of my coolant a week before I pulled my auger off. And I know there are some people that make little sheet metal contraptions with filters and stuff that go in there and catch that, but it's just like way too much effort for me. I'd rather scoop chips out with a freaking dustpan than try and, I don't want to be elbows deep in coolant trying to get chips out of my coolant. I don't want my coolant pump to be pumping chips through my lines and clogging anything up. So coolant's my first priority, and that's kind of taking priority over my chip management. So I have to scoop chips out of this mini mill with no auger, even though I paid $3,000 for this auger, with a dustpan in my hands and a little shovel, and it's lots of fun. And chip management's a very difficult period at a residential location because you got to have, the recycling people dropping 55-gallon drums off and picking drums up. And it's just, I don't have the space for a compactor to try and crush these things into little cubes. So, okay, stay on track here. Chip management sucks, and getting chips in your coolant is horrible. So taking priority over the chips is the coolant. To keep that clean, I had to pull the auger. That's a con. The machine is small, and there's no access to any side besides the front door, which I'm about to cut a hole in the side of this thing and install my own door. So I'm not sitting there leaning over the table, stabbing myself with vices all the time. Mm-hmm. That's a con. 10 tools in the tool changer. It hasn't been a huge problem for me. I know it'd be a massive problem for other people, but I try and program my parts around 10 tools, 9 with the probe.
Right.
I mean, it's a light machine, so there are some lightweight issues that come with it regarding surface finish on walls, which if you took a profilometer and you measured the wall surface RA or the surface finish of the wall RA wise, like this thing's putting out like a 15 RA with a sharp tool. It's a nice finish, but the finish is beautiful. But I have to go to the microscope and look at it and then say, oh man, my feed forward lines are like a little inconsistent, or there's like some like arc, like deviation, like my tool's deflecting, and there goes my
story
issues.
or your post about like the sawtooth that you get on it.
Yeah. Haas calls it picket fencing.
Yeah,
due to tool geometry, which makes no sense to me. So if there's anybody listening that can explain picket fencing to me and what truly causes it besides axial runout, I would absolutely pay you $1,000 to explain it to me. No joke. DM me, explain it, I will pay you. That's one thing I'm facing with it, is this weird picket fencing phenomenon. And I'm not quite sure what causes it, and nobody that I've talked to has any idea. But it tumbles right out. It's a beautiful, smooth finish. There is no gouging or issues. It's just an aesthetic thing that I've seen on more than just my machine. So, and if the second one shows up and it doesn't have it, ooh, you're coming down, Haas, and you're going to figure it out.
So let's talk pros, though. You obviously like it enough to buy a second one, so there's got to be some pros.
Its table's super light, so it's fast. Like compared to a VF2, even a VF2. Now, there's a lot of VF2 is a great machine, way better machine than a mini mill in my opinion. But if you took a program off of VF2 and put it on a mini mill, it'd run faster. It's just a faster machine. Acceleration and deceleration. It's quick. It's fun. It's not brother quick, but it's quick enough to scare me a couple months ago. 10K spindle, nice. Tool changer is pretty fast for being an umbrella versus side mount. I mean, it's not bad. It's pretty quick. Small table, that's a con, but it's easy to clean. There's not 9,000 feet of T-slots to scrape chips out of or put chip guards in or whatever. The control's awesome. I love the Haas control. It's super intuitive. Literally, I think anybody can run it, and it's quick. It's fun. I'm not a huge control of the Fanuc controller, but it's an awesome controller. But anyways, pros. It's a good machine. It cuts well. It's accurate. It's fast.
Fits in your garage.
It fits in your garage. That's a huge pro. Because trust me, I'm the king of trying to find a machine I can squeeze in the garage. And there's not a lot of them out there. I memean, maybe a brother, maybe like some like Gen Mill variant from like a Taiwan style brother replica, or a Fanuc Robo Drill with a little bit of I already have to cut a hole in my ceiling for the cable carrier to slide up in when it's at home. But it fits in your garage. You can't beat it. I've complained about this thing for months. I've had my HFO come out 8 times. I've had my HFO come out and replace my spindle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I won't even go into that because then I might hurt somebody's feelings at the HFO. But they did some dirty deeds to my spindle trying to preload a bearing, and I said, you better replace that. So
Oh,
anyhow, no, it's a good machine for what it is, man. I can't beat it. I can't beat the footprint. It's 220 single phase. This isn't
right.
even a 3-phase machine. You don't
Yeah.
even have to run phase converter or anything. It's just plug in 7.5 horsepower. It's drawing 24 amps at 100% spindle load. I can run 3 of them without any issue at my house.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's incredible. Short of not having a forklift, like I wouldn't probably have it any other way. I love the ability to apparently never disconnect. It's always right down there. Anytime creativity strikes. It's a good machine. If you have any questions about it, or if anybody has any questions about the mini mill, shoot me a message on Instagram. We'll get you taken care of. I'm fully transparent, and I'm not scared to hurt anybody's feelings when it comes to telling the truth. So
Good.
we'll get you taken care of.
So the last question we had was from Drew Fab. He said, tell him to leave some awesome for the rest of us. If he keeps using up all the awesome, what will the rest of us do?
That's funny.
So to end out the episode, like I always do, first thing, any shop, new things, new products, anything like that coming out? I mean, you got the new mini mill like we talked about. Anything else new happening?
I got a whole list of things, man. I got 100 things that I want to prototype and figure out if it's feasible or not. Nothing good enough to say that there's,
Sharpie holders coming?
Yeah,
Maybe a
some
small
Sharpie holders. It's kind of, I try to stay away from things like that because I just feel like I'm making things that like really aren't solving a problem. But apparently, there's a lot of people that have a problem with not having a place for their Sharpies. So maybe I should just get over myself and feed some people some aluminum Sharpie holders. But yeah, no, equipment decisions, that's huge. I wish I would have taken a little bit more time to talk to you about that. But just trying to figure out work holding and trying to figure out what vices I want to run and like what's worth the investment and what new tools do I want to try. I know we talked about that Freddy vacuum. I never pulled the trigger on that. I've been looking at that X-Air or however you say it setup. But just a shop vac, man, like a heavy duty 6 horsepower shop vac has been the best tool for me lately. It's amazing. Like, I hated pulling vices and trying to clean stuff, man. I'll just suck up all the chips right out of the vices with the shop vac lately. Throw it on like a rolling cart, vacuum it all out, stone it if I have to, lube it back up, throw it back on. Man, so much better. Just a regular old shop vac has been like my favorite tool lately.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we got a really nice one maybe a year or two ago, and it's been night and day because we burned up our first, tiny little one that I think a family member loaned us or gave us.
Yep.
And then, we bought a really nice, bigger Craftsman unit, and man, it's been night and day.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I just vacuum all the chips out of the mini mill if I had a bigger tank.
There you go.
Suck them right all out of the top.
Well, real quick before I get to my last question of the episode, are there any high points or things you do want to share about vice choice or tool choice? Speaking of that,
it's just really hard. I'm really good at spending a lot of money on things that just sit there, and I probably have like 10 grand on the shelves right now of things that I'm not using and things that I obviously can't return. Hopefully, at some point in the future, I'm able to utilize some of this stuff that I spend at premium on. It's really hard for the mini mill. If I had a bigger machine, it'd be a little bit easier of a decision to make. But it's like, do I go with fifth axis for some stuff? Or do I go with Lang? Or do I go with Orange? And like, I love these companies and I love what they stand for. And I love the quality that the owner, some of the owners, some of them I don't know, but even like Eric at Orange, he does some amazing stuff. And I've loved what he's done with the line of products he offers. And I really want one, but the 17.5-inch Orange Vice, the stations don't open up enough on a 12-inch travel on the Y-axis on a mini mill. Like they just don't open up enough without modifying the center jaw or whatever. So I just don't even know how to choose some of these tools, Like I see what other people are using, but there's not enough people truly pushing mini mills that I follow, at least. And if you guys are out there, send me a DM or say hi or something. I'd love to follow you and kind of see how you're problem solving a small work envelope. But no, I mean, tooling wise, I just keep trying different manufacturers, and I'm loving Helical lately, and like GWS. I've really been liking some of their tools lately, and even Mari Tool for tool holders, man, like those guys have been surprising me. I love their customer service, and some of the tools that they're offering over there work fantastic for a lot of applications.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's one thing I love about their company specifically is I can talk to the owner of the company
Yeah, you
anytime
can
I
call
want
up
to.
and Frank and Tom are more than
Yep,
happy to talk your ear
absolutely.
off.
And then
Yeah.
all the employees are phenomenal. I call some of these companies and they give me attitude before I even open my mouth. And then I say, boop, call somebody else.
Yep.
That's the number one killer, man. If you have customer service or anybody that's answering your phones and they have an attitude or a bad attitude about life, you need to switch their position because they are losing you money.
Yeah. I'd rather not have my call answered than answered by somebody with an attitude.
I know.
It's like, just have me leave a message and have somebody who cares call me back.
Yeah.
That's fine.
It's like, maybe I need a little bit of education on here. You're treating me like I'm ignorant, like I have no idea what I'm talking about. That's why I'm calling you. You're the professional offering customer service on your product. All I'm doing is asking a question. I'm sorry that you had to get up this morning and go to work.
Yeah. Well, and
So
people need to realize that somebody calling you for customer service is an opportunity for you to educate them on your product and have somebody be a supporter and someone who will tell others about your product and your customer service.
absolutely. And just as well as I do, I mean, when it comes to social media, the power of social media, the power of YouTube, I mean, it's phenomenal. The connections you can make, the stuff the problems you can cause if you want to be a bad seed, the bad just on products. If you don't know who you're talking to on the other line, I don't have to be Bill Gates to post something on social media and make you lose 20% of your customers.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like nowadays, some the regular average Joes that are, just fun to talk to, fun to watch on YouTube, they have millions and millions and millions of subscribers. They're massive. They have massive pool in the industry depending on what they have going on. It's like you need to be more conscious of who you're talking to on the phone or who you're trying to help and ensure that they are a nobody and then they cannot damage you know what I mean? Like you don't know. That's the thing. That's why it's no different. And I'm not trying to get into this, but if you don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know if the person that you're trying to start a fight with has 900 different degrees in whatever discipline. You know what I mean? Like you don't know who that person is. So it's the same concept. Like just treat everybody equally and be nice to everybody and like just give them what they want and be a decent human being and we're good to go. You know what I mean? It's just it's annoying.
It's easy though. Just be nice. Like it's
yeah, exactly. Just be nice.
It's really not that hard. So anyway, I round out every episode by asking my guest what they've been researching this week. It can be machining related. It can be something in your personal life. But what have you been Googling or trying to learn or anything like that?
No, that's a good question. And I always like listening to these answers. And I don't have an awesome one, but I'm going to try. Here we go. What have I been Googling? Number one, I have a few things, and I'm just going to run over these super quick. But I've been looking at different type of not necessarily 0 point. Everybody has their own deal. Different types of plates for the fourth axis and different types of vices that I would like to put on those plates because I'm not really going to do chuck work. I'm just going to do vice work out of it. Trying to figure out what's the best, what's the easiest to set up, what's most cost effective. And I am really leaning towards Lang, but I'm not 100% sold on that yet. As far as that boxes, packaging, I'm always trying to step it up and trying to see what I can do. Should I make my boxes smaller and put them in a different box? Should I make them bigger and ship them in a shipping box? But then what if my design on my box, makes my box a Target and it's sitting there with a bunch of colors all over it and somebody decides to pop it open because it's not discreet? I'm thinking about all these things. And then fourth axis. I've never ran a fourth axis before and I'm figuring it out real quick before that machine gets here. So just running through Fusion and tool orientation and everything like that, trying to understand real quick. It's actually really simple. I was making it way too complicated, but I'm super excited to start working in fourth axis mindset when it comes to design, which is so many capabilities, so many possibilities, and just so many less setups. Less setups are amazing. So yeah, man, just 4th axis, work holding. I think I'm going to order a couple of single station orange vices just because I like them. And they're not a whole lot different than the Kurtz, but I've just always been a big fan, like that Yoshimura exhaust, except these aren't going to disappoint me.
I wouldn't think so. We love our orange. I mean, as you saw with my picture.
Absolutely.
And especially if you're doing any kind of soft jaw work, like Carve Smart stuff or dovetail jaws in general, whatever system you use is just killer.
Yeah, and ordering 8-foot lengths of dovetail jaw stock and then just chopping it down to an inch or, 3 inches or a full, 8 inches, whatever. It's awesome. And then in and out. Like I'm using a Milwaukee ratchet right now to take my 2 bolts out. 2 bolt, 2 bolt, 2 bolt. You know what I mean? Like I could swap jaws 6 times in the time it takes me to pull one set of jaws out.
Oh, I know. I swap jaws at work occasionally, and I'm like, this is archaic. Like how are we still doing this?
No, totally. With the locating pins and not having to sit there and try and like tighten the hard jaw and then like slowly creep the soft or the dynamic or the moving jaw in until your part's lined up and maybe your chamfer's off a little bit. Man, I got to get on that orange vice life.
Yeah, you're going to love it for sure. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time. I know that time is a precious thing right now, especially with how busy you are. So I really appreciate you coming on. Before we close out, Patreon thank yous. These are the people who backed, and I just really appreciate everyone who's backed. But these guys, Jack's Precision, NHW Workshop, Tony from Exact Works, Joe Horvath, Pete from FTR, DTE, and Phil M. Really appreciate you guys backing. And yeah, again, thank you so much for coming on, Brad.
No, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it. I love the podcast. You bring a lot of people on here that I have a high amount of respect for. And yeah, thank you for backing. I'll back. Send me any details so I can help out there. And
I really appreciate that.
No, keep up the good work, man. It's not easy doing what you're doing, and it needs to be also acknowledged how difficult it is to take the time to do weekly podcasts, to record, to edit, to also run your business, to yada yada yada. Like I couldn't do it. And like, I feel like I'm never stopping. So just massive respect to you. You're doing a great job.
I appreciate it. Yeah. For everybody listening, anybody who wants to find it, patreon.com/within tolerance podcast. Thanks, Brad, for that. I mean, I love doing it. So I'm going to keep doing it as long as I possibly can. That's for sure.
No, absolutely, man. When you messaged me and you're like, hey, you want to be on the podcast? I said, oh, no way. Is this, all right. Can't wait.
Yeah.
No, it's great, man. It's an honor to be on here. Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation. I wish I lived closer to people like you so I could just come over and bother you all the time and have these conversations daily.
Well, anytime you're in Arizona, man, come on down and we'll hang out in the shop and you can play with the Speedio.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.